This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the Whispers of Nockmaar, that is, of course, Disney Plus's series Willow, is one returning guest, although it has been a while, far too long, in fact, and one brand new guest to Coffee with Kenobi. So first, we're going to bring in returning guest, Garr Van Orden. Garr, welcome back to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me again.
It's great to have you. When was the last time that you were on? It's been several years. Although we've seen each other at every celebration, there's always one time where we happen to cross paths, which is always super cool.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to bounce by you, and yeah, it's been great.
So cool. Do you remember when you were on before?
The exact date or whatever? I don't know. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah,
many moons.
Yeah.
Also joining us on the show, he is a regular on CWK Live with me. This is Bryan Stonecipher. Bryan, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello. Am I caller number 23? Did I win the Taylor Swift tickets?
That's good. That's way better than Ben's joke.
Oh, Ben took mine last week. But it is a sincere honor to be on with you, my friend, and happy to be here.
Oh, it's great. And unfortunately, you did not win the Taylor Swift tickets.
Oh.
But maybe I can send you a Coffee with Kenobi mug or something.
I'll make sure and tell Taylor that.
Yes, please do. Please do. All right. So, guys, let's talk about Willow. I've been talking about this series, of course, since it aired. Where are the two of you at your Willow fandom? Although, Garr, I feel like you're going to have a really good story there. And how has the series worked for you so far? Garr, let's just start with you.
Well, I should say I might be the biggest Willow fan I know, I suppose. Willow is my 16th favorite film, which, people usually laugh when I say something ridiculous like that, but it's pretty simple. My 11 favorite movies are the 11 live action Star Wars movies. And the next 4 are the 4 Indiana Jones movies. And then the next one is Willow. And I'm wearing a Willow shirt. And
yes, it's a cool one too.
So yeah, I was super excited about this. I mean, I know Dave has been talking about doing some sort of sequel or something for a long time. And so I was insanely excited about this series coming. And then I've been loving it. And generally, I think it's been getting better. And it's a wonderful show.
Good. So you really do. You're a big fan. Have you seen the movie a lot? Yeah.
So I grew up watching it on VHS that we recorded from TV. And it's funny because, since then I've watched it a million times. I shared it with all my friends. I'm like, this is the next best thing, Star Wars, Indiana Jones. And then this, I shared it with all my neighborhood friends. But yeah, we since then got it on DVD and Blu-ray. And I still to this day remember what scenes are extra to me, that they were just cut out because of time for commercials, with watching it originally off the taped VHS. But I recently went to go to see it in theaters for the first time because I must have been like 4 or 5 when it came out. So I don't remember that. But I took my kids to see it, the Monday before the series aired. And there was a live Q&A broadcasting from LA that they did afterward. It was awesome.
That's very cool. Now, Bryan, what about you? Where is your Willow fandom and how have you enjoyed the series so far?
So if we lead off with a 10, I'm probably on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm probably like a 1 or 2. I watched it when it came out and then don't remember seeing it. I watched it a few years ago with my my wife and kids and my brother-in-law. I don't remember watching it then. I remember we watched it, but I watched it again for this. I'm like, I knew the series was coming out. I'm like, I'm just going to watch it over just so I can understand what's going on. And I'm like, this is a great movie. And my wife's like, we watched this several years ago. And I'm like, I don't remember that. I don't know why I don't remember it, but it was really, really good. But I'm a sucker for magic and wizards and sending underdog heroes on majestic quests. So I'm getting my my fandom level is increasing, but nowhere near Garr's, nowhere near close.
Yeah, well, that we've got a nice little balance. We've got a nice little balance, and I've said many times I've seen the film, but I haven't seen it since it was first broadcast in theaters, and I'm going to wait and not watch it until I've seen this entire thing. So it's almost going to be like a reverse prequel situation for me, which is kind of cool. It's kind of a fun little experiment you don't often get to do with Lucasfilm products or projects. So let's talk about the Whispers of Nockmaar. We'll just go in reverse order. Bryan, let's start with you. We'll save our letter grade for the very, very end. We're going to spend the entire episode sort of explaining and defending the grade we're eventually going to give it. But give me one word to describe this episode for you and just overall thoughts on the episode in general.
Chaotic. Just because there were bits that I really liked, but there were bits that were confusing and trying to figure out where it was going in the overall arc, because there are 8 episodes. So trying to figure out, okay, where is this? This is the 4th one. So we're midway. Are we going to get some resolution to some things? Are there going to be some other things that pop up? And this is my favorite episode so far, with all the smaller plot points that come through, but I had to watch it a couple times to make sure that I knew what was going on, because it's like, okay, I thought I knew, but then it's like, okay, we go back and circle around, and it's like going through a maze, through a labyrinth. It's like you think you understand, then I had to turn the subtitles on to make sure I understood what was happening, what was being said. So it kind of was a descriptive episode with just chaotic.
Okay, I like it. Garr, what about you?
All right. Well, I love this episode. It's my favorite so far, or up to this point. And I thought about many different words, but being the one guy on this panel that is a huge fan of the original movie, I have to say nostalgic. There's a lot of nostalgia. And Dan, when you saw Revenge of the Sith, if you're like me, I bet when you saw the interior of the Tantive 4, I bet the people, the crowd cheered, and it was like just that set was amazing. And there were many sets just in this. There are many more than sets, but like just the sets alone, there were many that in Nockmaar Castle that were like, wow, I never thought I'd see that again. That was so awesome.
I'm glad. And so both of you, it's your favorite so far.
Yes.
That's cool. I would say the first episode is still my favorite. My word for this one might be jarring. And I think that's a good thing. There's a lot of visual grotesqueness, with Graydon and being cursed and seeing his metamorphosis, seeing a very quick flashback to him as a child, and then just some of the crazy things that happen. Possum bladder. Anyone? Raise your hand if you had that on your Willow bingo card. And then a few things that also I found to be a little bit jarring as well, but we will get to that. So let's just open up the floor where, we're sitting around the CWK coffee table, having some coffee, talking about Willow together. Go ahead and bring up any points that you want, and we'll just kind of see what happens.
So what about the beginning? In the book and the title are completely different. And I can't remember what the language was. I'm expecting Garr would know what language it was written in.
Let's see, I don't have it written down, but I think it's like dark necrotic or something like that.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. With the blood running down, that was, and because when my wife and I watched the episodes, and she didn't realize that the symbol on Elora's arm is the same one that was on the cover of the book. And then once this episode, I paused it and rewinded it, and I'm like, that's different. Wait a second, what's going on? So then it's like, okay, well, let's let the episode go through. But I just thought it set the perfect tone.
Yes, the new evil book is the Malatrium, and that's that same book that they find in the castle there. And then also that symbol is like similar to what's on Graydon's chest as well, which seems crazy. Like, did this sort of thing happen to him before? I don't know. There
certainly seems to be an illusion of that, and I too really enjoyed the the beginning of that because it's very cryptic. And I started thinking, gosh, are the rest of the title sequences of all of these episodes, do they have similar sort of a tone projection? I don't remember seeing it quite so generally, but with the blood, you knew it was going to be a gas. I mean, even like the Whispers of Nockmaar, the castle is, for all intents and purposes, a haunted castle, which is a great classic serial kind of a concept anyway, speaking of it being a Lucasfilm property. And you get the sense that when we go in here, there's going to be a lot of crazy things. There's going to be some temptation and some trickery. There's a lot of nice tropes here, and they fit well, albeit somewhat predictable, but also kind of interesting. Because I think that's what the series is doing so well. It's working so well for me, is that while there are some familiar tropes, they're modernizing them or just giving them just a little bit of a nudge in a different direction, which I enjoy. One thing I will say though, and again, I'm just sounding like a dad at this point, but Bryan, are you a father as well?
Yep, I have 3, 21, 18, and 14.
Okay, perfect. So we've all got kids.
Mm-hmm.
The language threw me off. Like I've been wanting to show this to Mason. I mean, he's seen Marvel stuff. He's certainly, he's 9, but he doesn't talk like that, of course. But these are the things that give me pause. Like one of the things I've liked about Willow so far is that this isn't Game of Thrones. It's not anywhere close to Game of Thrones. And the language isn't, of course, anywhere close to it. But why do we need to it takes me out of it when we're using modern swear words to tell a classic mythological story. I don't know, maybe I'm just being silly, but that just doesn't work for me.
1 or 2, and that's what I thought. It'd have a different tone. So 1 or 2 words isn't bad for me, but it's like a teenager just casually throwing them out. So I mean, 1 or 2 placed, I don't have a problem with if they're appropriate, but it just seemed that they were throwing it in there just to
because they could.
The young, yeah, because they could.
Mm-hmm. And not quite HBO syndrome, but it's similar. Yeah, I agree. It didn't seem to serve the story. Had it been something that was used throughout the series, that probably wouldn't have even batted an eye.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not someone that likes to watch mature content like at all personally, but yeah, it's at the range where it's like, yeah, I can handle it. It's not too big a deal. It did surprise me kind of at first. Certainly, the original movie doesn't have that much language, but it is sort of modern language that Mad Mardigan is just riffing and saying funny random things that are modern to the time. Of course, that was many years ago now. So yeah, it's no big deal there. But yeah, there's a little more language and also the modern music now with this show. They took it to a little bit another level.
Yeah, I guess I was going to say, but let's just go all in with the music. So I've talked, since we've been talking about this on Coffee with Kenobi, how much I've enjoyed the music at the end of the first few episodes and how they can kind of blend in, have sort of this a Renaissance fair feel, but a more modern bend on it. And then last week, of course, we're off to Neverland. And then now for this episode, we're Soundgarden, right? Black Hole Sun. How did you guys feel about that?
I love Soundgarden, and my 18-year-old was in show choir last year as a senior, and my 14-year-old's in as a freshman. So I got exposed to power ballads as slow songs. They would change the rhythm and the tempo of it. So that was the first time that I heard, I think it was Enter Sandman. Some school used Enter Sandman as their ballad, slowed it down. I'm like, okay, this is awesome. So when it came on for the third episode, I'm like, I wish they would have, I don't understand why they have somebody covering that, but I think Soundgarden worked in this one, and I'm a huge Soundgarden fan. I think Soundgarden worked in this one better than Metallica because I knew the song within the first 3 notes. I'm like, oh, they really pulled this out. But it seemed to do better with Eric standing there looking around like, what is going on, versus the Metallica at the end going into the castle. They could have had a completely instrumental. I think that would have done a lot better, just like this. Because with the drums rapping and you got the heavy rain, you're looking at the castle. I think that would have had more of an effect.
Interesting. Garr, what about you? Now, you're a music guy, right? Don't you teach music?
No, I used to be a drama teacher.
Okay.
And I'm not a drama teacher anymore. I'm a I'm at home and my wife is making the big bucks, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, you don't want to know about me, I guess. But about Willow, it did surprise me, honestly. The first couple episodes that they were doing that, it kind of reminded me of, well, the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit pictures where they have an original song at the end in the credits. Kind of reminded me of that, but these are covers. And
because the first two weren't covers, right? The first two episodes.
I
if they were, I didn't recognize them.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think they're all covers, but I don't know.
They might be. I pretty much gave up on popular music after 2005.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to spoil the next episode, but the next episode actually has modern. By modern, I mean 1960s music in the episode, like not credits, but like in the episode, which is even, taking it a step further. But anyway, I'm in it. I'm in now. It surprised me a little bit first, but I'm kind of liking it, and I'm looking forward to getting the soundtrack. So.
Which it did. There was on Spotify, I believe, at least the orchestral music is on there for the first couple of episodes, which is pretty cool.
I'm going to check that out. Yeah, I love, James Horner did the original score, and James Newton Howard, and this guy I don't know, but Xander Radzinski is working on the current score.
Which is great. For me, this one, again, I promise I'm not going to rain on the episode because I like it, but I felt like, okay, now it's feeling gimmicky. I mean, because Soundgarden is not as recognizable as Metallica, I wouldn't think. But I think, and I think you alluded to this, Bryan, I would think if it would have been instrumental and just give us the hints. It's very similar to the beginning where they don't come out and say, hey, this episode's going to be bloody. Buckle up, kids. They don't say it. They just let the book and that beautiful imagery of like the red trickling down, that tells it. Like, I feel like this story and these characters and this myth this world that they are building is strong enough. Like, I don't need to be nudged into popular kid music areas to enjoy it. I feel like this show is better than that, and it doesn't need that. I don't know.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, it wouldn't have been my choice, to be honest, but it might be bringing in people that, wouldn't necessarily be fans that do like it. I don't know.
Well, that could be. That could be. Let's go ahead and talk about Graydon. Let's talk about Graydon. So Graydon is a character that has been, for the most part, very, very quiet, very introspective and introverted. Of course, now that he's been infected, because it's definitely an infection, I like the metaphorical approach here that we see that there's something going on with him, and we certainly get a pretty clear indication of what that is at the end of the episode. We know that he clearly has a lot of knowledge of lore in the world of the arcana. But in this one, as he's being more and more twisted, and you got this, he's got these, like, he's throwing up. They rip open his shirt, and he's got this nasty infection that's just popping out, almost like he's got thorns in his soul. He, what do we make about what is going on with him, particularly with that flashback?
So are you cheating because you're looking at my notes? Because that's the first thing I had written down was about Graydon and his growing character.
The force is strong with all of us.
But just that he's so quiet, but yet he knows so much about magic and myth. And Willow seems to just keep saying to him that he doesn't know anything, but yet he seems to know a lot more than what he leads on to. So that's the mystery for me, is at what point does his backstory come out? Where does the knowledge meet the road to where he becomes this massive character? Because I thought he was going to be some small little, when he starts off as a squeaky little kid that can't drink out of a cup, he doesn't know how to drink out of a cup in the first episode. It's like, okay, how's this kid gonna go on a quest? Because we know that's gonna happen. But yeah, just to understand what's happened to him and how how he knows all that. And I think that was one of the interesting parts about this episode, is to see, I have all these side quests and how everybody goes through what each of the characters, and Graydon I didn't have written down right away because his didn't happen right away. All these characters go through until the end.
So do we think that he is playing possum? Speaking of possum, how many possum references are we going to have in the episode? How about that? But is this something where he has had a long sort of simmering infection that has possessed him, or has he tinkered with the dark arts before? I mean, at the point of this episode, it's very unclear, very, very unsettling. But so you just kind of wonder, is he the goods? Is he just trying to get close to Allura, or is there something more sinister going on? I mean, is he a puppet, or is he a puppet master?
He seems genuine, so I don't know. But if he is, turns out to be this great evil, that's going to be a big surprise to me. But it seems to be different sides to him. Certainly in this episode where he's possessed, and they're, obviously literally different sides to him. I would be surprised if he's genuinely evil. I don't think he is.
I don't think he is either, because he was the second choice. His older brother was supposed to be the one to get married, and he has to, because the vision that he saw, his father said, you have to make up for what you did.
Right.
And what's interesting about the scenes, like those flashbacks, is the actor is named Tony Revolori, and he's in those Spider-Man pictures.
Yes, Flash.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but his brother actually plays his brother in this Mario. And at first I thought it was just him in like a wig or something, but it's actually his brother that plays his brother, and then his younger brother plays his younger self. His brother Mario and his brother Benjamin. Yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
That is cool. Do you think he was possessed when he was younger? Or is this part of the current infection that he is fighting? It's like he's possessed, of course, because he is. Is that altering his memories and like amplifying his guilt? Because to me, that makes sense. That's kind of a really neat way to portray the guilt that we feel, and this, by the evil taking over, it also muddies his memories as well.
Yes, I think something happened that we're going to find more info about down the line. Something happened where he was possessed or something beforehand.
But if he was possessed, I thought the same thing, but if he was possessed, how did they get it out of him? I mean, did they have an exorcism on him before? Because you only have a certain amount of time before he's lost.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Not sure.
I mean, really everybody in this episode is fighting demons, and Jade, portrayed amazingly by Erin Kellerman, she's still very much struggling because of what happened in the previous episode where she had to kill her mentor. Let's talk about, do you want to talk about just her, or do you want to talk about her with Kit? Because Kit kind of has her own little thing going on.
We could talk about Jade first. What I have written down is that she seems lost. She reminds me of Anakin, and the discussion she has with Borman out in the rain, that she wants to be a knight, and same thing with Anakin. He wants to be a Jedi Knight, but it's not what they thought it was going to be. Completely disenchanted. They're just like, well, this is supposed to be my dream, and it's not coming out to be anything of what she wanted. Right. And so she's just looking for something to look forward to, because she's lost.
Right. And of course the main difference is that she appears to want to do it for like a sense of self and belonging, but not because of ego. Whereas of course Anakin is very much about ego. And it's interesting you mentioned Anakin. She reminded me more of Enfys Nest. I don't know why.
Yeah. Oh, I love that actress. Yeah, she's great. And she was also in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Erin Kellyman. Yeah, she's great. And yeah, I thought it was interesting that they seem to be implying that Kale
There's a history there or something.
Yeah, killed her parents, it orphaned her, and then she was taken in by Sorsha. And then, of course, I love that quote when Borman's like, everyone deserves one good cry per quest.
Yes, he's great. He's great. We'll get to it. Well, let's talk about General Kale. For people who are not as really familiar with the film, you both have seen it more recently than I have. Who is General Kale, and why should we be scared of him? I mean, the imagery, his mask, or unless that's just his actual face, is quite chilling and amazing.
Yeah, he's awesome. He looks kind of like Skeletor.
Yeah.
And he was played in the original movie by Pat Roach, which is awesome. Of course,
cool.
because he played many characters in Indiana Jones. Yeah.
Yes.
And then, do you know who voices him in this new series?
Is it you?
No, I wish. Yeah. No, it's Sam Witwer.
Of course it is.
Yeah, I voiced him, and I guess he studied him for a while, and because there's some similar lines, so I thought maybe they just took it from the movie or whatever, but because he says something, some things that are similar, like "now you die," some similar things. But yeah, Sam Witwer just nailed that perfectly. That was great.
He's good. He's good. Well, that's quite an understatement. So is he? So he's like a secondary henchman villain in the original film. Does he have any special powers or abilities? Is he just kind of scary and has a sword? Which is more than enough. It would be enough to scare me.
I mean, he's like Darth Vader in a way. I mean, Darth Vader was originally conceived as basically just a henchman in a way, but he got expanded upon. But
yes.
Yeah.
That's cool. It was fun to see him show up. Bryan, is there anything you want to add to that, or should we move on?
Well, the one thing is, when I wrote down all these, each of these visions that these characters saw, that was one that I was trying to figure out, that because Jade fights him, and what's the relationship other than he killed her parents? So that's what we're trying to figure out. So, and that she's running from him or running from her past.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that I was trying to understand the most of, is trying to how that relates. But the one thing is that, and I don't think you've brought this before, is that Eric is actually named after Eric from the movie. That Madmortian. I think didn't Eric kick him out of the army and stick him in the desert to die, and then came back and.
Yeah, Madmartigan's friend with the red hair and the braid. Yeah.
But Kale kills him. And that's when Madmartigan comes up and Eric says, "Win this war for me." And that's what I think pushes Madmartigan out. But that's what I remember at Kale at the last, is that's how he charges to kill him off at the end, just like something happens to his friend and pushes him to do that.
Well, let's talk about Kit. Kit is interesting in this series because I feel like she had a much better sense of who she was when it started. And then as this quest is going on, I feel like she's getting a bit more and more, I don't know if lost is the word I want to use, but more and more sort of in search of substance. I mean, she certainly had more substance to her by a landslide than her twin brother, clearly. But I feel like, her learning that when she's been dueling all these years with Jade, while she is a formidable opponent in her own right, she isn't quite as fearsome as maybe she originally thought. She also holds the secret of who Dove is for a much, much longer time than just knowing that she is able to create that beautiful bush and able to do magic and create life. Basically, she keeps all this stuff in, and then at the last moment, fortunately, and I do want to talk about the scene in a lot more detail, she does come clean. But I really think it's fascinating that she is sometimes, I don't know if she's going backwards, but she's kind of walking sideways. And I think that's very purposeful and very, very artful storytelling.
She's got a lot of growing up to do, for sure.
Yes. And maybe that's as simple as that, too, maturity.
And then when you've got a character like Ahsoka, for example, it's like really sort of immature at first, and then they grow up. It's like, wow, it's a huge arc. So I think she's got a long ways to go, which is going to be interesting. Hopefully we get many more seasons. But certainly in this episode, she's haunted by the fact that she's, sort of the same blood of Bavmorda. And she has that vision of the young Bavmorda, which was really cool to see that expounded upon. And I learned that that same actress, Ruby Cruz, who plays Kit, portrayed the young Bavmorda in that in the voice content there. That was really cool.
I saw it on the Lucasfilm website, their episode guide. Pretty neat.
She seems to be the character that doesn't. She's had an identity crisis because she came into this quest starting, and now I have written down Blood of Evil because that's where she realizes that she's got the same blood as Bavmorda does, and that she's lost all the. I mean, she's having an issue with her relationships with everybody. Doesn't know what's going on. Was trying to be a leader, and then Jade told her that she can't really fight. It's like, okay, now I thought I knew who I was. So she's going through this puberty identity crisis. Like, okay, who am I? What do I do? Because she's questioning herself every time she does anything. She tries to be confident, but it just doesn't happen.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
And she becomes friends with Allura. Like, that was the one person, Dove originally, she didn't want to be friends with and thought was so beneath her. But she has this great moment where she really is the hero to the hero, like Han Solo was in the original.
I love that scene where Allura is standing, like she's on the ground and she's leaning against that stone. It almost looks like a sacrificial altar, which that's basically what it ends up sort of being in a way. And she's looking at her child self. And in that moment, while her child self is helpless and crying and lost and scared, so is Allura as an adolescent, or she's older than an adolescent, I guess. But in her I'm assuming she's supposed to be a teenager, in her teen form, also feeling helpless and afraid. But it is Kit who goes up to her and says, "You know what? Actually, you did do magic. It was beautiful." And it's like this great moment when she says, "I don't know what to do," and she says, "Throw out the recipe." I thought that was an interesting choice because I feel like before they made a big deal about. Well, I guess it makes sense. They made a big deal about how she is a cook, which is actually pretty awesome because being a cook, to be a really good cook, when you get good at it, you can improvise and you can adjust. I don't know if either of you are cooks, but I am very much not a cook. I like to eat. I like to eat my wife's cooking. She's amazing. But I'm like a cereal, instant grits, instant oatmeal kind of a fella. I can throw a mean spaghetti in there, sprinkle a little brown sugar, but that's the extent of my experimentation with food. So I'd probably be the worst magician ever. But for her, Jade says, throw out the recipe. Just kind of, or not Jade, Kit says, throw out the recipe. So she goes up there and then something takes over and they make it sort of a sensual-ish sort of a thing, which is fine. And then she absorbs the spirit of Bavmorda out and of Great. And then it kind of goes through her. And at first I'm thinking, is she going to be infected now too? Is she going to be possessed? But it's almost like she's a filter, like a magical filter. And everything just kind of dissipates and goes away. We'll talk about Willow later and what we learn about him. But a lot of interesting things going on here.
Well, in the if you ranked each person in that room who could talk to Allura, Kit would be the last one that she would listen to, but that's what makes it such a powerful statement. She goes up to her in a very confident way and says, "Hey, you can do this. I know I've been a really horrible person and friend to you, but guess what? You actually did this in the forest. You can do this," and kind of helps her do that. But what you were talking about with what Allura did, it reminded me of Rey doing that force healing. We've never seen that before in the movies. We've read it in the books, but we haven't seen that in terms of sorcery, other than of somebody being able to just pull that out. It was kind of mixing Star Wars and Harry Potter, kind of like a Death Eater pulling out the soul She was pulling out that evil spirit and then just kind of kicking it back out. And that's what I was worried about. I'm like, okay, now she's going to be infected.
Yeah.
Oh, great. And ending in episode 4, there's supposed to be 8 of these. Now what happens? The whole hope of the world is gone. But yeah, I saw it just kind of turn from that. I think it was white coming out of him. And I thought it would be like a darker, and then you talked about being a filter, just ends up just kind of crystallizing and then just vanishing up.
Yeah, a couple things I didn't notice the first time I watched that I noticed later is, one, there was a bit of foreshadowing that was just sort of a joke at first. Was Willow was talking about, oh, you don't touch it, all this stuff, and he's like, don't eat it, and Laura's like, why would we eat it? It's just a funny thing. But
exactly.
Then she ends up eating it, and then it ends up changing her, and her hair starts to turn red, just a little lock, kind of like Rogue in X-Men.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Like when she was little, right? Didn't she have red hair?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if they dyed her hair or something when she was.
It's a wig. In the movie, it's a big old wig that they put on the baby, which either twins or triplets, so they could use multiple babies. But they put like corn syrup on there, so it'll stick on there.
Well, all that stuff when they're talking about, I don't remember what kind of goo it's called, but how could you not think of COVID? Right? And sure, and I feel like that was a clear sort of a wink to the cameras. They probably obviously made it during COVID, and they were like, "Okay, don't be near it." And I just thought that was pretty clever.
Yeah, well, I did think the humor in this episode was a lot better. It didn't seem as forced in the second or third episode, because some of those jokes just I don't think went over very well. But this seemed, I was laughing and thought that they were very, very good.
So many hilarious lines. I mean, I just got to say, I'm feeling energized and optimistic about the sexorcism. Who says that? That's hilarious.
I love Boorman. He's great. He has an interesting little arc too, because I feel like everything in this, all the things that are haunting, it just amplifies or overplays the inner turmoil or the challenges they're all facing. So for him, he's clearly a greedy person, and I mean, he's clearly someone that will give in to his baser urges. But in this, he's so obsessed with something that he still has on him that he says that he's willing. He seems to that he's willing to kill for it. So kind of a low hanging fruit, but an interesting one. I hope they give him more substance, because I think Boorman is such a great character, and he's just very captivating to kind of watch. See, played by Amar Shada Patel. I love him, and I hope they give him some more.
He's so funny. Even before the episode even started, they had him recap by saying, someone just concisely recap everything I missed, from the last episode. That was so funny.
That was amazing. That was one of the best parts. I'm like, okay, I don't care where this episode goes. That wins it for me right there. Just like they use their own shtick to be able to actually go through the recap.
It's pretty. This is so dumb too, but I think he's a good eater. Like just when he's eating that pig, it's just very satisfying. Yeah. Like it's very it's gross, but it just seems like he's really just a hungry adventurer. I mean, when you're playing D&D, you think about things like that, and I just really like that little bit of acting. It may seem like a minor thing, but he's just great. But do you either of you agree that you hope that they give him more? Or maybe this is just all he is.
I hope he gets more. I mean, I wrote down treasure for his what he was doing in this episode, because it seems that he couldn't get that lock he couldn't get into that room, and then he lost his major treasure on him. He lost the luck sense. Like, okay, and that's all he was obsessed with. So that's what I was trying to figure out. I'm like, oh well, he never opened the door, and I'm like, oh, I want to see what's in that door now. And so that's and that's what I wrote down, that I like him a third, because a third he tells the truth, so I can only like him a third. So trying to understand him a little bit better. It's like, okay, so what do we get from that? So was he really trying to get the treasure, or was that the mystery of the castle taking over what he wanted? Because he actually had it on him the entire time.
Right. And when you're someone who is fallen by greed or avarice, then you're going to always want more and more. And so again, it just plays up to your baser nature.
Yeah, it went differently than I thought it would. I thought maybe that would be kind of like the siren's call, like he wasn't supposed to go there, and then it would turn bad, but it was just all about wanting to go there, and then greed and wanting more. And it was interesting that his Lux Arcana, that
Mhm.
little thing like disappeared, but then it was there the whole time. So we don't know what we saw was real. Like, for example, when Willow is like telling Alora not to do it at the end, like, was that real or was that the castle a vision to her? I don't know.
Well, you mentioned Willow. Let's talk about Willow. Willow still, for me, is a problematic hero, but I think that's on purpose. I think he is very much problematic because he's obviously been hiding a really important part of his legacy for whatever reason. It's also very clear that when he uses magic, while he is very powerful, it also very much affects him in a very adverse way.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also got a very inconsistent temperament. And maybe that's because he is fighting with himself as much as he is with everyone else. But he's still someone I'm having a hard time. Well, I like him and appreciate him. He's still one of my least favorite characters, and I want him to be my favorite.
Yeah, I think some people want him to be almost this perfect Gandalf character.
Right.
But he's got somewhere to go once again. He's got somewhere to learn, and his character has some growth coming, I think.
And he's got some demons that he's fighting. He's got some real doubts for being supposed to be the most powerful sorcerer alive. I like that idea of a flawed mentor.
Yeah, and I think he's hilarious. I mean, Warwick Davis, of course, is phenomenal, hilarious and everything. But the way he argues with a lot of these people is maybe like, oh, that's kind of weird for a mentor character, but it's totally what he would do with Mad Mardigan. And I think it's hilarious when he's like, "You're the worst apprentice ever."
Well, and he seems, and that what I wrote down was truth, that he has to, that's what he's been fighting, is that what actually happened. People have told the legend of how he banished, that he just obliterated Bavora away, but that didn't really happen. And it's just the fact of how does he deal with that reality that he's not, I can't remember who said it, that she kept calling him that he's not a great sorcerer.
Like
Kit's
sorcerer?
mom. Yeah, I can't remember what's Kit's mom's name. The twins.
Sorcerer.
Yeah. She keeps calling him, saying that he's not turning him away in those flashbacks that we see, and that kind of, I think, feeds him a little bit more to say, well, maybe I'm not, even though I didn't do this. But he kicked everybody's behind in the fight with everybody before they got to the castle, and so he's been able to do these things, and he's been able to do this alchemy, and so he's maybe not the best, but I mean, he can hold his own. So I just don't think that he has the confidence enough to be that person that he thinks he can be while hiding that secret.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a bit of both. I mean, because he's clearly got way more magic than he did in the movie, but people like will say, like they said, Graydon said early on, like, oh, I believe it was the Fibonacci hex that you did. And he just doesn't say anything, even though it's like,
right.
Yeah, it was the disappearing pig trick that really happened, right? But he still, either way, saved the day. But I think he's not the greatest sorcerer of all time, like people are saying, but he's still pretty great.
Yes, yeah. You really want to see what is going on with him. Again, I really like the idea. It's not the same as in Spider-Man 2, with Doc Ock, with the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, where as he doubts and struggles with himself, he loses his abilities temporarily. So it's not that, but it's a similar idea, and I really like it.
Well, and there's something going on too, because his daughter Mims, played by his real daughter, came in with the voice and said, what happened with the village? And so there's something more to be revealed there with Willow's village, and somehow he's responsible. Yeah.
And we don't know what happens every time he uses magic. If he runs out eventually, we don't know that piece yet. So, I mean, if you have the unlimited mana to be able to cast whatever spell you want, yeah, you're going to go out and do that. But I think that's holding him back too, that he doesn't I don't know if he's got an hourglass with it in there that he only has a certain amount left.
Yeah, I wondered that too. Or if, like I said before, if it's like Spawn, where like you can run out, or it just hurts so much that you may have an unlimited supply, but how much pain can you take?
Yeah,
which is another interesting idea too. Well, as we wrap up talking about the Whispers of Nockmaar, are there any ideas, characters, plot points that you want to talk about as we wrap up the show?
I just thought it was the master plan of using the castle, of using Nockmaar Castle. I'm like, it's like from is it Goblet of Fire from Harry Potter that Voldemort sets this in place, that there's a port key to bring Harry to him.
Yes.
So is this the plan to bring these heroes to this castle for them to go through this? So that's where I came up with chaotic for my word. It's like, okay, where is this in the master plan? Because if this was the master plan of the Crone to be able to bring these characters here to knock them down a notch, or to actually get rid of Allura, to banish her, I mean, that would be great, and that's fantastic. But without knowing that full story, it's like, okay, where does this fit in? I mean, it's a great episode with all these. You split up the party in D&D. You never try to, if you're playing D&D, you never split up the party, but everybody gets split up at some point. So it's one of those, like, what's going to happen to them? So that's one thing the last thing I had on here was like, is it a master plan to send them to the castle? Because if it is, it's genius, but we don't know if that's going to come out.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know if it's a master plan, but I think that the Gales you see at the end of the episode, I think maybe they were holding off because they figured the castle itself will finish them, but they were able to defeat this, which I mean, the whole episode is kind of like a haunted house episode, which,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling you, Dan, on Facebook that this young cast kind of reminds me of like great John Hughes picture, like,
yes.
Yeah, Breakfast Club, or, things like that. But also it kind of reminds me of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And there was a haunted house episode of that. And
yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite TV shows of all time.
Yeah, it's great.
I love that show.
I have a million things to say if you,
yeah,
if you have extra time. We didn't talk about Allura much, about her going into the dungeon and seeing her mother, which was awesome. I mean,
yeah, talk about that.
Or the line, "I was born here." That was the
yeah,
yeah.
I kind of loved that. I mean, it's a little cheesy, I guess, but I loved it. But so we got more from her mother. And being a huge fan of the movie, once again, it was like, okay, seeing that was cool, but then we got an extra line where her mother starts talking like, oh, she's here now, I can see her. Like, it's kind of a time bendy thing in a way. I thought that was awesome. And I read that the original actress, her name is Sally Ann Law. She played the mother who died at the beginning of the movie, and they brought her back to match her own performance, which
that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow. That is very cool. Lucasfilm was so good about that too.
Yeah, well, and David Collins, I'm getting a lot of facts from him. He's the one in charge of this sound, and he's amazing.
He's wonderful. He's a great guy. All right, so the only other thing I want to talk about, we didn't talk about the end. There's a nice little cliffhanger with Prince Eric. We haven't seen him since the first episode. Anyway, well, I guess we talked about the musical aspect of it, but at this episode, we're not going to talk about the one that comes. We're only going to focus on the Whispers of Nockmaar for this, just to not spoil things. But at the end of this episode, he is so confused and lost, as are we as an audience, because we don't know where he is. He's in the castle. The dungeon where he is imprisoned is open. He walks out. There's no one around, and there appears to be dust and dirt and just emptiness wherever he is in the castle. So what do we think is going on here?
I don't know. It's weird because, like, why isn't he being guarded like you would expect? Yeah, that world seems really cool, like, and awesome. Like, I can't wait to see more of it. But it's like, wow, I did not expect that.
Yeah, what is happening? Wait, do we flash forward in time? Do we flash backward? Is he in another dimension? What do you think, Bryan?
Or maybe that's his vision that he sees. Maybe he is in the castle or something, and that's his vision that we see of where he would like to be, I don't know what he's being shown, or it's that he was teleported somewhere else, that he's outside the barrier, and that's the place that they're holding him. But yeah, there are no guards, so and then that's when I realized it was Soundgarden they were playing, and I'm like, okay, well, how does this fit in? Is there because it talks about I mean, I looked up the lyrics not that I don't have them memorized, but it just talks about something being in disguise. So is this something is he the person that's in disguise? And I mean, I don't want to speculate about what's going to happen, but it's like, why did they pick that song with that particular moment? So
Right.
is it something that they're trying to show him, or is it trying to, I don't know where he is or what's going to happen.
It's great. I always like when you get more questions than answers. Well, speaking of questions and answers, now it's time for you to reveal your grades, your letter grades for the episode. Garr, let's go with you. What letter grade do you give this one?
A+. Loved it. I love the show. I love everything about it, but I do think it's generally getting better. I got to give it an A+. I absolutely loved it.
Outstanding. Bryan, what about you?
Mine's an A-. Like I said, I think if I knew with some of the, when they were inside doing their own little, hearing the voices, that seemed to confuse me a little bit. But like I said, I thought it was the best episode so far. I like the side questing for each of the characters, just like D&D. I'm like, you don't separate the party, but that's what's going to happen. And that's the tone of it with the beginning of the book. I'm like, and they Borman talked about asking for a summary of everything. I'm like, yeah, they had me at that.
My first viewing, I would have given it a B-. Watching it again, I would give it a B. I sometimes struggle with the inconsistency of some of the characters, but my hope is that it's just because their arc is just painful for them because of their ages and their lack of experience in a quest scenario. Willow's a continual struggle with this mantra. While he's been High Aldwin for a very long time, a mantle is very different from the action itself. So what is it that the magic is doing to him, and what is he so afraid of? So I'm interested in that, and I also really liked Allura's the symbolism with her and her younger self, and how that is played out too. Plus, Borman eating the pig was pretty fun. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It took me a second. Yeah, it took me a second to realize what was happening, and I'm like, oh, that's right. They changed all of them into pigs.
They changed them all back, though. Yeah,
that's right. I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Actually, instead of just an A+, I want to give this an eagle fighting, a giant gold statue of an eagle fighting a horse. I think that would be a better grade.
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
I think that is absolutely appropriate. Well, gentlemen, thank you both so much for joining me to talk about the Whispers of Nockmaar in Disney Plus's Willow series. It's a really fun series to watch, but it's more fun to be able to talk about it with people like the two of you. Well, please, Garr, thank you again so much for coming back to Coffee with Kenobi. I hope it's not so long between this and your next appearance. Please let everybody know where they can find you and reach out to you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Anytime somebody drops out, let me know. I'm at Garr Wars on Twitter, if that still exists. GARRWARS. And I'm at my name, Garr Van Orden, GARRVANORDEN on Instagram. And I'm most active on Facebook. My name, Garr Van Orden.
And the CWK Cafe, you're a regular.
Yeah,
you can always point out when Tom messes up, which I like.
Yeah. I love to give Tom a hard time. I got to meet him at this last con, which was fun. Yeah,
he's great. Well, Bryan, what about you? But I know people, of course, can find you most weeks in the CWK Cafe for CWK Live. But where can people reach out to you?
My social media is Master of 3 Jedi, since I have 3 kids, and that's the number 3. Or it's masterof3jedi@hotmail.com. But yeah, I try to get on there as much as I can. But thanks again for having me, and I only want to be on with Garr when we talk about Willow because I sound so much smarter when I'm on with him.
I love it. Well, hey, thank you, Bryan. You were awesome. It was great to have your insights on here, and I appreciate the both of you so much. I hope you both have a very Merry Christmas.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.